All righty. So, in this particular episode, I have Mr. Zack Braxa with me from Gemography, who is the co-founder and head of engineering at Gemography. And what we are going to talk about is engineering talents, connecting engineering talents globally, all across, and aligning them with remote work opportunities. So, without further ado, we are gonna head over to Zach and ask him certain questions we have, and just let's talk about engineering, education, remote work opportunities with him. So, hello, Zach. Give us an introduction, which I have not given on your behalf.
Sure. Yeah, of course. I'm, as you mentioned, I'm a co-founder and head of engineering at Gemography, among other things. Um, so Gemography, for the people who might not be familiar with the company, so it's a talent platform that connects developers, engineers, software engineers, data engineers with remote opportunities. Um, as of today, we're available for developers in 9 countries, few countries in Africa and a few countries in Latin America. And on the company side, we focus mainly on the US and Europe, mainly France, UK, and obviously the US. Specifically New York, San Francisco, or Los Angeles, the main tech hubs. One last thing I
Awesome.
might want to mention is my background is in software engineering, of course. Started my career as a software engineer doing Ruby on Rails initially before transitioning into iOS, and did that for a couple of years, and obviously engineering management after that, and then obviously startups.
Awesome, awesome. So let's get into the background story of Gemography. So, what made you start Gemography? And also, I have a lot of counter questions to ask you. So, give us like a walkthrough.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question actually. So I'm born and raised in Morocco. My co-founders as well, and so growing up in a developing country, I'm sure a lot of people can relate as well. There wasn't back in 2015. There wasn't like a lot of startup opportunities in Morocco and in Africa in general, and I guess this is true of other places, again, emerging and developing countries. And so demography was sort of basically, came out of this pain of not having access to startup opportunities locally. And so we thought, okay, remote was not a thing back then. And so we had the idea of how can we basically connect developers with companies in Silicon Valley, right? How can we help software engineers based in our country with companies, in San Francisco, or back then I think San Francisco was kind of the main tech hub. Initially it was not actually, or the setup was not fully remote. We used to pitch it as distributed teams, and so people would come to an office, and then work sort of remotely with the company. Yeah, technically speaking, it's more distributed work than remote work from home work.
Great. So I have this follow-up question, like, did you think about, aligning engineers globally with, San Francisco-based companies, primarily because of the fact you thought about that engineers from different parts of the world don't get as much opportunities, or they are underpaid, or they are not compensated according to their skills. And when you place them in a SF-based startup, or a startup which is just based out of Europe or so, they kind of are compensated well and kind of at par in a global scale. So is it also one of the reasons of starting up Gemography?
Um, Yeah, I mean the compensation aspect was part of it, but it was not the main driver. The main driver was the the work itself and the kind of technical challenges. So for us, like even for me personally, like the motivation to go and seek startups or to look for a job opportunity with startup, the initial motivation was not really the compensation as much as it was the opportunity to work on high impact products, to work on products that look well designed, look beautiful with intuitive UIs, to and again to have an impact on the users, as well as work on some hard complex problems, right? For a lot of people who got into engineering, um, one of the main reasons is this sort of passion about having a complex problem, trying so many different ways to solve it until you find the most efficient or the cleanest way to solve it. Um, and so, yeah, obviously the compensation also is a factor. Whenever an engineer is thinking about job role, and this has been shown in multiple surveys and developer surveys, the main three or the top three reasons are always sort of the same, right? It's the growth opportunities, like personal growth or professional growth opportunities within the company. And so that was sort of the reason behind creating Gemography, is to help developers gain more personal growth in their day-to-day jobs. And the second and third reason is working alongside really smart, talented people. So that's also that comes up a lot as a reason for picking a job over another. And the third, and sometimes in that being the second, is salary, right? And so in building Gemography, we try to take all these top three reasons in consideration, like what kind of job opportunities would satisfy all these reasons. And a lot of times it's tech companies, working with tech companies and startups.
All right. Yeah. So it was, good to hear that the primary motivation behind starting Gemography was definitely to bring in talents who can create good products, right? And, you had also mentioned product management as part of your own biography as well. So I just wanted to talk about a generalistic perspective of what you think about the gap between how engineering is taught in college and how engineering is taught in real life, and how your program or the cohorts or the programs you're running at Gemography is actually helping people, getting upskilled, or just filling up the requirement, knowledge, and the skill gap. What do you think about it?
Mm, yeah, well, that's a very big topic. The role of education and colleges in helping engineers um, be prepared for the job market. And obviously, we're talking here about different job market. The local job market is obviously can be different than the global job market. Um, yeah, I think it particularly for software engineering, it has been challenging for colleges to keep up with. It's software engineering is sort of a moving target, right? Like it's not one thing. Like the way we define it today, the way we define software engineering today will be different 6 months from now and probably 12 months from now. I mean, it looked different 6 months ago, right? Like, Copilot wasn't available, and all of these AI tools weren't available to help developers. And so, if like we were designing a college syllabus for next year, like it would be very tricky. Like, should we teach AI? Should we teach GitHub Copilot and all of that? And so I know that like for college, it's very hard to keep up with all the advances, right? Like you have advances every month. You have new frameworks all the time. You have new versions of frameworks all the time. And so colleges can do so much, but they can't do everything to make sure that the software engineers are well prepared. And so that's why for software engineers in particular, and also for maybe other job roles as well, but self-learning is very important. And a lot of people think that you need self-learning only if you're not going through college and so on and so forth, only if you're like dropout from high school, whatever, and that's why you need self-learning. Well, pretty much everyone doing software engineering needs some kind of self-learning, right? Like, because if you went through college and you learned Java 7, by the time you hit the job market, maybe Java 8 is already released, and so you need to fill the gap, right? And so self-learning is a big part of that, and there is a whole set of skills required, from like researching, benchmarking, researching books and reading them, or skim reading them, and asking for feedback from other people, networking as well, finding good projects to work on, open source projects, as well as coming up with idea for your own projects. Like, that's because through these things, that's how really good software engineers can learn, by reading books, watching tutorials, and practicing through open source or side projects and all of those things. And so now we talked about colleges, we talked about what can developers do on their own, but also we try as Gemography to play a role in that equation. And so one of the things we did early on is sort of a boot camp, a 1 month boot camp that so we used to run for people before they started the job with the startup. Like, so you would apply to Gemography, and you would get matched with the company, but right before your start date, you would go through this 1 month boot camp, to basically get the time to learn all the skills that you're missing at that point in time. For example, maybe you're joining the company as a React developer, but maybe the company are using Angular. That shouldn't be a problem, as long as you get enough time to learn Angular. And 1 month obviously is not enough to transition from being, for example, a senior React developer to a senior Angular developer, but at least it gets you started on that path, in a way. Now, is the bootcamp needed? I'm not sure, because again, with AI and all the advances happening there, and when AI is going to be applied, sort of like with ChatGPT, like you can today create sort of a custom made, learning plan, for yourself, right? Like, let's say trying to learn React, you can use ChatGPT or other AI tools to figure out, okay, here's what I know about React, or here's what I want to learn about Angular. Create a custom plan, learning plan for me, all the books I need to read, all the topics I need to know about. You can even practice like interview questions. You can practice with the AI sort of questions to check whether you learned the topic the right way, and so on and so forth. And so we're not doing the bootcamp anymore. Also partially because we started focusing more on people who are 100% or 99% fit for the job. And we can talk also about the why behind that, and so on and so forth. But yeah, so bootcamp is definitely something that we were really happy with, and would love to reintroduce it again at some point.
Got it. So here's an interesting discussion that I want you on, and that is, you must be aware that in the Twitter community right now we have this hashtag which is very popular: build in public or learn in public. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of the Build in
So
Public
basically, some
hashtag, yeah.
influence. So some of the influencers, who have been successful in getting remote job opportunities, they have been encouraging a lot of students to, learn in public, build in public, which basically just, summarizes the fact that whatever they are learning, let's say they are into web development, whatever they're learning in a certain day or whichever projects they are building, they are just supposed to share that with their followers or with their connections over social media platform. Now, how does it help? It helps in getting under the purview of different recruiters, different companies, senior managers in different companies, and in a right time they can also get the opportunity because they have their proof of work which is displayed on their social media platform. So, in this regard, what do you think, Zach? Like, how does gemography gets placed in this particular regard when people are already adopting this, self-learning culture in public, putting things out there for themselves and building the credibility? How does gemography, work around that role, and how is gemography adapting to that? I would like to know from you.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, hmm. Well, the building public, um, well, I haven't learn in public per se. So that's actually an interesting trend. Um, so yeah, I would say two things about this aspect. Um, Gemography is more is more than a job platform, or at least that's what we're trying to be. To help developers with more than just finding them, helping them find jobs, right? So that's how we started, obviously. But these days we try also to help them with preparing for interviews, as well as even when they find a job that they like, help them with career advice or how to plan their careers and so on. And so there is that aspect that I think can be complementary to, or it can make you demography useful even for people who build in public and learn in public. And the second aspect is building in public is not necessarily uh, meant for everyone. The same way, not any startup, like not all startups were able or are meant to be built in public. Some startups choose to build, privately. Some startups stay stealth in stealth mode for a long time, and so I'm guessing it's the same thing for talent, right? Like sometimes the talents, they're working on things or they're building side projects that they might not want to build in public, or maybe they don't have the social media presence to motivate them to build in public or learn in public. So I think we can adapt with different cases. So for the people who are learning in public, we can help them with some of the things. Like they might be able to find a job on their own, but we can help them with, for example, the interview prep aspects or the career advice aspects. For the people who are not into social media, or they don't feel like they have what it takes to, or they don't like it for privacy reasons or other reasons, we can obviously help them as well to find jobs without having to go through social media.
Yeah, so this is a clear platform for somebody not having a social media presence or a public proof of work. The one of the best alternatives is to go join Gemography because they have built in the credibility, and the other people who are looking for such opportunities globally, they should kind of go and align themselves with Gemography because it kind of subsidizes and compensates for the lack of social presence a lot of people have. Am I correct?
Yeah, and a lot of people don't have, personal branding is important, and obviously it's important for career growth in general, but also people might not always have the time for it, or as you know, a lot of developers might not have even the desire or motivation to do it, right? And so, for example, like I see a lot of developers being active on Reddit instead of Twitter or LinkedIn because they like the anonymity of Reddit, and they can speak their mind freely and so on and so forth. And they also don't have to worry about how many followers they have and whether people are liking, their posts and so on. And so, yeah, I mean, personal branding is good, but it also comes at a cost, right? Like it comes at a time. It needs the time investment. It needs learning the skills or learning the tips and tricks, sort of to get engagement, and like what's the best time to post on Twitter, and what's sort of what gets engagement on Twitter and so on. And so some people might not have the time again or the motivation to learn those things.
Yeah, you're clearly right on this particular point that personal branding is very important, but then not everybody is kind of cut out to set some time aside for personal branding because a lot of people do not have the bandwidth to carry on. And to be very honest, when we are kind of advised to keep posting things on the internet about what we have done, which conferences we have visited, to be very honest, it takes a lot of energy also. Like, to be very consistent enough on social media, putting up a post, maybe the post will probably take 2 to 5 minutes for me, but then doing that daily also requires the consistency. And at the end of the spectrum, people do realize that it is exhausting because it's a long term thing. Because today, if I say that I want to post for 30 days, yeah, in 30 days I will have a lot of engagement, I will have a lot of activity, but then what after 30 days? I'm dead again. So it's like a
Yes.
lifelong journey. Like anybody who steps on personal branding game, they have to do it till the end of their career, or as long as they want to stay active in the working space. So I think programs like Gemography, or Gemography as a company, does help bridge this particular gap in regard, where the developers can focus on their own technical skills, and Gemography can take care of the credibility that they bring to the table as a human being, which could have come if they were consistent enough on their personal branding side. So I think this is a very important point we touched on this particular regard as well. Also, one more thing, um, about remote work. Since you are at the intersection of companies and engineers who are coming to join Gemography, so could you like give us insights as to what do remote companies actually look for, like what kind of a person a certain professional has to be? I'm sure that just having spectacular and stellar technical skills just doesn't work like that. What are the different other X factors one should keep in mind, and how to exactly get a remote job? If you can provide us a very practical overview of that.
Sure. Um, Yeah, I mean, technical skills obviously are the I would say that's the very minimum, right? So every company on earth, when they're hiring a remote developer, obviously they want the person to be proficient in whatever tools and technologies they use. But obviously, because the job is remote, it adds extra importance on certain skills, right? Obviously, the obvious one is communication, and so communication becomes, if it was kind of important before, it becomes extremely important. And communication, like the devil is in the details, right? Like when I say communication, I'm not talking about just being able to send Slack messages, reply, and so on. But when it comes to communication, there are certain skills beyond the basic communication skills that are required. For example, one thing that gets mentioned a lot is over communication, being able to, instead of sending 3 Slack messages or having a long conversation over Slack, like having a multi-touch conversation over Slack, instead of doing that, like having all the information in one Slack message. And this is particularly very useful, a very useful skill for remote teams that are working asynchronously, right? So like let's say we're working in different time zones. Um, if I send you a message and then when you log in the next day, you reply because and maybe because I didn't mention certain things, like you're gonna reply with a question, and then I send you the missing details in my second message, and then when you log in the next day after that, I provide, you see the missing details, and then you answer me. This particular conversation took maybe 3 days, but if I were to phrase the initial message in such a way, or maybe provide all the details in the initial message, maybe I could have managed to have the conversation with my teammates in 24 hours instead of 72 hours, right? And so when people hear communication, they only think of, okay, can I speak English? Can I understand English? Well, it goes beyond that. It goes also in the how do you determine the level of details you will provide. Like, you're gonna write a Slack message. Are you writing it for someone who is in a different time zone? Or are you writing it for someone who's online at that moment and they can reply right away? So maybe it's going to be short. If it's a different time zone, so maybe you want to go extra details, but also not go super long to the point where they're going to receive the message and, postpone reading it or whatever. And so hitting that sweet spot is very important. And a lot of these things, people learn it with practice, but it also helps to learn it even before you join a company. Like if you're working with friends on side projects, do set up a Slack organization even if you don't need it, and try to practice these things with your friends and classmates and so on. Another important skill in remote is autonomy, right? Again, when you're working remotely, whether you're working in the same time zone as your teammates or in a different time zone, autonomy is very important because a lot of times you're gonna find yourself stuck with something. Maybe you're debugging an issue, or maybe you're trying to run the something in the app and it's not working. When you're in an office environment, you can always go to, you can always, ping the person next to you or go to someone and ask them, hey, I need help with this. In a remote environment, you might, I mean, you're probably sitting alone, in a co-working space or in your home. And so being able to debug the issue, try to figure out like why is this not working, and also try to explain the issue to a teammate becomes very, very important. And so autonomy is another thing that is very, very important. And the third part, and also the last aspect I'm going to mention, is ownership, right? So a lot of the companies who end up hiring remotely, they care a lot about whether the person we're gonna hire does have the ownership needed over the product, right? Because again, and this goes back to asynchronous communication, right? Like if I give you a user story today, and then we're working asynchronously and we're not like meeting multiple times a day because we're in office, in the kitchen, and whatever. I need to be able to trust you that you're gonna do your best with that user story and maybe fill in the blanks with certain aspects of the user story that you're within make a decision on. But because I trust you and you have ownership, you're gonna be able to fill in the blanks as best as you can. And by the end of the day or the sprint or whatever, or until our next meeting, by the time we meet again, the feature will look better than what we initially had in mind for it.
Thanks for sharing it. I think it's much more important in that regard. But let's give you a situation. Let's say there's a student who is probably starting out in their own career, and it's probably in college. So, what's your advice for that person? Like, should that person build in public, or should they join gemography and learn through it?
Um, well, definitely, like people shouldn't tie their career growth and job search to one company. Like my advice to people, like if you're looking for a job, a remote job, yeah, I mean, obviously, I encourage people to apply to Gemography, but I also encourage them to apply to jobs on LinkedIn and other job boards, right? Like you shouldn't, put all your eggs in one basket, right? And the same goes for how you learn, and it's not really exclusive. Like it's not you gotta choose between applying through Gemography or learning in public. Like you can do both, and that would be the smart option to do, because you're putting your eggs in different baskets, and hopefully you apply through Gemography, and then maybe our the other platforms similar to Gemography, like just apply through all the possible channels.
That's great. So, where do you really see yourself going ahead with gemography in the near future? Like, how do you think gemography is going to contribute to the educational landscape in the coming future? Because the coming future is faster than before, it's faster than what we had experienced after 2007. So, what do you think the landscape regarding career, jobs, and education is going to be?
Yeah. Well, we definitely want to be available in more countries. We're not available, for example, in India, and so we would love to be available for developers in India, for example, as well as other countries in Latin America and Asia. So that would be one next milestone for us. Um, we also want to be even more helpful to developers, even developers who maybe didn't apply yet or never applied or don't see a point in applying. And so, for example, one of the things we want to work on is, interview prep resources that any developer can use even before applying. Or maybe they can use them to apply to other jobs and would find them beneficial. And so, yeah, I mean, we want to be I wouldn't say, yeah. I mean, yeah, we want to be the Stack Overflow of career, like of engineering careers, right? Like people go to Stack Overflow to find information about, I have this issue with my code, and they ask a question, they get some help, blah blah blah. We want to be Stack Overflow for particularly engineering and engineering career topics, right? Like you want to apply for a remote job and you have a question like, hey, um, how can I increase my chances? You come to Gemography. If you have a resume and you don't know if it's good or not good enough, hopefully Gemography can help as well. And so whatever developers need to make progress on their career, whether that's job search or sometimes you want to get a promotion to like an engineer manager and you don't know what skills you need. Hopefully, we can also help with that.
Awesome. I think that's what I liked so much. You want to become the Stack Overflow for anybody who wants to have like or want to switch to a remote job when it comes to engineering. But I also have another question since it's just not engineering or developer jobs which are going remote. I think almost all kinds of job are going remote. Anything that is kind of can be done over a laptop or can be digitalized, like let's say content writing, it is also a
Yeah.
job that's highly remote in nature. Yeah, just like developers, and there are different other careers also. So what do you think, like, does Gemography have any plans to do remote job searching for other professions as well apart from developers?
Yeah, I mean, eventually, yes, but also like we don't want to like lose, we don't want to lose focus. And also, yeah, so like we want to serve as many people as possible, obviously, and help as many people as possible find remote jobs. But we also know that to do that properly and in a very efficient way, we also need to keep focus and make sure, like for example, like for interview prep, um, we want to help. Interview prep for a data engineer is different than interview prep for an iOS engineer, and so on. And so it takes time to sort of build those kind of guys, and so on and so forth. And so if we suddenly go all over the place and suddenly start supporting all job roles, it will be pretty challenging to provide that kind of depth in how we help engineers. And so yeah, we're trying to find the right balance between serving as many countries as we can, serving as many job roles as we can, while also not becoming I don't know, like useless in a way.
Got it. So could you like give us a quick glance as to like how many people work at Gemography? Do all the people at Gemography work from their homes or remotely? And then, what's any sort of a case study that you would like to share, like some sort of success stories that you have had from Gemography? You're absolutely free to share that with us.
Sure. Yeah, so right now we're around 50 people. I think nine of those are the team building demography and building the different aspects, the marketing, running the marketing, sales, and admin part of demography, as well as the recruiting part. And the rest, it's developers working with different companies, as I mentioned earlier, in the US, Europe, and so on. Post COVID, we went fully remote, and so everyone is working from home, including the core team. Um, yeah, and we plan to stay that way for the foreseeable future. In terms of case studies or success stories, um, yeah, I think the story that impacted me the most so far is the story of a developer who dropped out of high school. It's a high school dropout, and then learned um, front-end development on their own, as well as English. Though they actually had to learn front-end development and English on their own. Again, they didn't graduate high school, um, and then through Gemography, they were able to get a job with a German startup, right? And the developer is based in Morocco, the startup is based in Germany. So through maybe LinkedIn or through normal channels, they would have never been able to land that job, probably. And because again, like even into 2023, we still have sort of strict rules. A lot of companies still have strict rules in terms of like what degrees you need and what kind of education you need, and you need the work experience and all of that. And so that person didn't have the work experience, didn't have the degrees, but they were really good. Like in an interview, sit down with them. If you don't ask them about their degrees or education or work experience, and you just ask them about React, and you ask them about technical questions, they were really good, right? And so we knew that it would be a challenge to find a job opportunity for that person, but again, it was more than worth it, because we knew that the impact on their career, and also the impact on other people's career will be huge, because other people will see that as an example of even though I don't have the degree, even though I don't have the work experience, if I try hard enough, I will get the job that I would like. So yeah, that would be probably the success story that impacted me the most.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Zach. I think it was lovely talking to you today.
Likewise.
And yeah, in the coming future, we're going to have even more discussions regarding engineering skill gap, the education gap, and how the technology industry is ever changing. Because for a company like yours, who is completely focused on this developer ecosystem, it's kind of, sometimes it kind of becomes pretty difficult to mismanage a lot of things, because you realize how the engineering ecosystem is running at such a faster pace. Like, we are living in a world where I think everything is like running past the usual record, and the lives of developers are even more difficult. I get it. Like, developers have this opportunity of working remotely from different parts of the world, and in this engineering developer ecosystem, it's kind of inclusive. We have a lot of help. We have a lot of resources. There are conferences we have where we go and network with people. Unlike a lot of different other industries, but at the same time, in order to be able to keep pace with and keep updated with whatever is happening, it's also kind of difficult that we sometimes just either ignore or we don't appreciate enough. So any concluding thoughts that you would like to share with people who are beginning their developer journey, or people who are already at a intermediate stage in their developer journey, or people who are looking forward to go to even bigger opportunities? What's going to be a generalistic conclusion on your side for them?
Yeah. Yeah. I would use probably something that Warren Buffett said about assets. He's well, it's not a direct like an exact quote, but basically what he said, that the best asset you can have in the best asset you can own is your sort of yourself, right? Like, or the best asset you can even invest in is yourself, right? And so that would be my advice for people that are still in college, as well as people who are 10 years through their engineering career, right? Like, people have this sometimes tendency to focus on the job and the job responsibilities and this and that, and getting promoted within the job or getting their first job, and they forget that through all of that they also need to set some time, evenings or weekends, to invest in themselves and continue learning. And so even if the company doesn't ask you to read books, or if your employer doesn't ask you to do coding outside of work hours, you should do that for yourself. Like, you should do it to develop your skills, to keep up with, as you mentioned, industry trends and so on and so forth. And so yeah, so coding and software engineering shouldn't be a 9 to 5 job. It should also happen after 5 on the weekends. And again, I'm not asking like that you should work extra hours on the job, but work for yourself, right? Like, work, maybe there's a new programming language that came out. Say, okay, I'll give it 2 hours on the weekend. I'll see what is that about.